So, good morning, friends. Once again, I welcome you all to this class of video lecture, e-lecture. And friends, this is BA Part 3rd, English Literature, and we are taking Paper 1, Poetry and Drama. And today we take up a very famous poem written by Robert Browning, and the title of the poem is My Last Duchess. This poem has been written by Robert Browning. So, friends, Robert Browning belongs to the Victorian era of English literature. And before we come to the poem, it is essential for us, it is beneficial for us to get acquainted with Robert Browning. Robert Browning was born on May 7, 1812, in a household where every influence favored the nurturing of the poetic spirit. His father had a rich collection of rare books, and his mother was a woman of deep religious convictions. And when they discovered that their son had the making of a poet, they encouraged him for poetic composition. He came under the influence of Byron in the beginning and then of Shelley, and under the influence of the latter, he discovered that poetry could have color, radiance, passion, and melody. Browning was a major Victorian poet and a contemporary of Tennyson. Friends, Robert Browning and Alfred Tennyson both are the two important poets of the Victorian era. Browning is known for his intellectual vigor and his physiological studies of human nature. Browning is supposed to have a deep knowledge of human psyche, human temperament, and behavior. And in his poems, he writes dramatic monologues where certain typical characters are investigated. So he is like Shakespeare in the studies of human nature and temperament. Educated mostly at home, he was well versed in arts and their appreciation. The most important event of his life was his meeting with Elizabeth Barrett in 1845. She was him. Elizabeth Barrett is herself a renowned poet and an admirer of Browning's verses. They fell in love almost the instant they met. A year of intense wooing followed, and Browning succeeded in persuading her, in spite of her delicate constitution and the opposition of her stern and very Victorian father, to elope with him. Finally, Browning had to elope with Elizabeth Barrett. They lived for the most part in Italy, at Pisa, Florence, and Rome until her death in 1861. Perhaps this personal experience, recorded in their letters and in some of his poems, one word more, by the fireside, made him one of the greatest love poets of the century. This is the love part of Browning's life, that looking to the opposition of the family side, looking to the opposition of family convictions, Browning was not permitted to get engaged with Elizabeth Barrett, and finally both had to run away from the family and society, and most of the times they lived in Italy. So this love affair is well recorded in the most studied poems of Browning, and they are one word more and by the fireside. This by the fireside is prescribed in MA English literature. So, their letters reveal a rare intellectual and spiritual kinship, and inviolable and intense love and a wonderful critical penetration. He returned to England after Elizabeth's death and settled in London. So, after the death of his wife, finally Browning comes back to London. Though he was a prolific writer, and though his poems had appeared regularly since the early beginning in 1833, recognition came to him late. He has to wait till 1868-69 before he could find a large, though elite following which admired him more for his philosophy and his optimism than for his poetic qualities. He died at Venice in 1889. So, friends, this is a very brief introduction of Robert Browning as a man, as a poet, and as a lover. Right? Now, friends, this My Last Duchess has been a dramatic monologue. So, this is one of the most popular poems written ever by the British poets. My Last Duchess was published in Dramatic Lyrics in late November 1842. In the collection of 1849, it was made one of the dramatic romances and lyrics, and in the rearrangement of the poems in 1863, it was put under dramatic romances. In the first publications, it was entitled in Italy, and it was in the 1849 edition that the present title, My Last Duchess, was given. My Last Duchess is a dramatic monologue spoken by an Italian duke of ancient lineage, a widower, to the confidential agent of a count whose daughter he proposes to make his second duchess, and it is believed that this is Duke Alfonso of Italy, which has been presented in the poem. It is Duke Alfonso II. So his wife is dead and he looks for a new marriage. So an envoy from a neighboring state has come to approach him. So in this dramatic monologue, the dialogue between the two has been well painted, has been well put and delineated. So dramatic monologue is that sort of poetry where only one person speaks and another remains silent. But we can feel and we can come to the presence of that person who is the listener. It is not clearly known if Browning based his poem on the life of any particular duke. It is a matter of investigation whether it was Duke Alfonso or not, but research says that it was Duke Alfonso of Italy. But it has been suggested that the source of his story was the career of Alfonso II, last of the great Este family. This duke first married a young girl called Lucrezia, daughter of the Duke of Florence, who brought him a handsome dowry. Her life with him was never happy, and she died 3 years later under very suspicious circumstances. Soon after this, Alfonso Alfonso began negotiations for the hand of Barbara, niece of the Count of Troy, whose capital was at the Innsbruck. The agent of the Count, who concluded the negotiations, was a native of Innsbruck. The reference of class of Innsbruck at the end of the poem gives credence to this theory. It is said that Alfonso II was like Browning's Duke, cold, egotistical, extremely possessive, and a patron of the arts. So, Browning is like Shakespeare in investigating human nature and psyche. Cold people, egoistical people, extremely possessive people are delineated with superb presentations of wit and humor. It has also been suggested that my lust Duchess owes its origin to Shakespeare's A Winter's Tale, with Leonte as the model for the Duke and Hermione for the Duchess. But jealousy is not the prime passion of Browning's Duke. It is a fierce possessiveness, yes. Which particular human aspect has been delineated by Browning in My Last Duchess? It is not the jealousy. Jealousy, though jealousy is also a human weakness, but exactly it is not jealousy of Duke with his own wife, but rather it is fierce, extreme sense of possessiveness. You know, many times extreme possessiveness brings fall to human psyche, to man and woman. When we become extremely possessive, when we become fiercely possessive, to be possessive is a part of human nature, because we human beings have some sense of attachment to the things, to people, to relations, right? But when we become extremely possessive, when it is undue, when it is beyond normal limits, then it causes a sort of weakness, it causes a sort of psychological disease, right? And amid that psychological um, you know extremism, we commit some crimes, and we commit some mistakes which are not pardonable, which are unpardonable. So it is a fierce possessiveness that makes him look upon the Duchess as a piece of art. Browning has represented the Duchess. Now, the two characters have been described in the poem. On the one hand, Browning describes the Duke, which is cold, possessive, cynical, egoistic, selfish, full of jealousy and envy. But on the other hand, some superb human qualities are delineated through the Duchess. The Duchess as a pathetic, stifled figure, rendered incapable by circumstances of giving expression to her talents and feelings. It has been, she was merciful, generous, kind hearted. See, the lines come in the poem. She smiled at everyone, she smiled on everyone, she was kind hearted, she was broad minded. So the Duke could never tolerate such traits of her personality. And finally, the Duke says, I stopped all the smiles. Then I gave the commandments. You see the cynical Duke delivering the commandment. I gave all the commandments. So I am reminded by this word commandment. I am reminded of the recent book of Taira Kashyap Khurana, the 12 commandments of being a woman. You students read the book of Tahira Kashyap Khurana, the wife of famous actor Ayushman Khurana, the 12 commandments of being a woman. So in the poem there is a word command. I gave the commands. Then all smiles stopped together. So we finish the class since the space doesn't permit us. Later, Mrs. Browning lived in Wimpole Street. Her talents and passions were stifled by the tyranny of her father. So the poem has been written in the form of a dramatic monologue. In the dramatic monologue, only one person speaks. So here the speaker is the Italian Duke of the Renaissance period, and the listener is who? The listener is the messenger who has come with a marriage proposal. So thank you friends. We shall come again to this point. Thank you very much.